Welcome to Da Vinci's Discourse, where the minds of today's most innovative entrepreneurs are unveiled and explored. And my name is Kyle Campbell, your guide on this journey into the depths of the entrepreneurial psyche. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the minds of the greats. This is Da Vinci's Discourse. Why don't we get into a little bit about yourself? I'm curious. If somebody were to ask you who you are, what would you tell them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been a lot of things. I guess I'm a writer, basically.
Mm.
And so was a paid writer been a paid writer since I was 15 years old. I wrote some poems for a magazine,
Wow.
poems, of course, and they paid me $30. And so, and that was when $30 meant something. So I started then, and I put it away for a while because I already know how to do that. I figured I'll try some other things, and so, but I came back to it, and so I was writing, I guess, Super Bowl spots by the time I was done, and then I wrote a book, came up with an idea about why do we actually believe in some products and their services, trust them, that the Starbucks I buy today will be the same as the Frappuccino I bought yesterday, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And so why does that happen? And so um, I was in advertising, and Starbucks never advertised at that time, and they just swept across the country from the West Coast to the East Coast. And Google, around that same time, also didn't advertise. Apple only advertised for big events when it was coming out with something, a product. And so there was obviously something going on, and people were talking about Nike tribes and the Apple cult and things like that. And more to the point, um, people were in a meeting. People We'd be presenting a advertising campaign, new advertising campaign to a client, and they'd be saying, "Well, Apple doesn't, uh, uh, Apple, Starbucks, Google, and others don't advertise, and they're very, very successful. So why should we be spending $30 million on your advertising campaign?" And there'd be silence in the room as someone pulled something out of their ass, and we'd move on and produce the spots or whatever. But anyway, it was something that was lurking in the background, and although people were talking about it, thinking about it, and so forth, talking about the hero's journey and blah blah blah, there was no answer. And so I had some time to think about it, and I came upon the notion that brands are, and many other things around people, places, or things being products and services that we advertise, we're basically belief systems and once you
Mm.
created the belief system
Mm.
and articulated why we believe, you attract other people who share your beliefs. And that point were consumers, customers. But they can also be fans, they can be friends, they can be advocates, and people who belong to your community. And in the end, we belong to all sorts of these communities, right? You're a friend, you're part of a family. I should start there, I suppose. Part of a neighborhood. You're part of, you have your own friends, but your friends might be interested in other things. You might have sports friends, you have work friends, you have people in a book club, you have people, if you're religious, you have church friends. You have friends who drive the same cars. You have friends that go surfing. You have friends that like soccer. You have other friends that like baseball or football or tennis or pickleball or whatever it is, right? And so if you're lucky, you have friends in all these different communities, and you have shared values, but you also have shared rituals. You have shared language. Try taking the language from pickleball to your book club. It'll
Yeah.
work for about 3 minutes, and then they'll kick you out, right?
No
And so
kidding.
and shared music, friends, and so forth. And so if you're lucky, you belong to all these different kinds of communities, because being alone is generally a form of punishment. right? Being in isolation. And so, which was why COVID was so startling or cruel even to some people, for some people, because we were legislated to be locked up, right? And so um, so we're reaping some of the results of that now. And so the in terms of wellness and mental health and so forth, which were subject areas that we were concerned with, but not personally engaged in, maybe, right? And so my book, which is called Primal Branding, was published by Simon Schuster, 2006. Last week, I gave a speech in Brazil about it, talk to students there. Tomorrow, I'm speaking to some people at another university, and we've worked up with this construct that I created, all over the world with billion-dollar brands. The book is required reading at YouTube. So we have a whole bunch of YouTube fans who are engaged in that. And you can Google Primal Branding YouTube and hit some of them. So anyway, this is the dialogue, right? So now you've launched me on a monologue. So
Yeah, I would love to get into
that's who I am. I'm a writer, basically.
I
But I'm
love it.
also helped launch brands and recreate existing brands that are 150 years old, for Johnson & Johnson, Kraft, Levi's, etc. And then we help launch new brands and help people launch themselves, basically. How do they become more of a personal brand or whatever, generally in order to change jobs or switch careers, right? So we talk to someone about that, doing that probably once or twice, a couple times a week.
So I want to get into a little bit about what you mean when you say a brand is a belief system, because that's fascinating to me. I
Sure.
love the way that you put that. Can you tell me a little bit more, just expound on how you look at a brand being a belief system and what's even at the core of it, and then how do you shift the belief system?
Yeah.
Get into
Yeah.
that a little bit.
So a brand is probably the wrong word, but it's a fungible word, and we understand what a brand is. And so a brand in the corporate world is not the logo and the website, which most people believe. The brand is really the community that surrounds you. Okay, it's your fans, it's your friends, it's other people that you want to hang out with, basically. And so it's that community. And so sometimes that community is buyers, consumers. Other times it's voters. It could be raging fans at a Billie Eilish concert or something like that, or Swifties, right? Or it can be just the people that surround you, like I just mentioned, your friends that like you all like the same concert, you like the same books, you like the same computers, you like the same software on those computers, etc. And so you like the same video games, right? And so if you've played Call of Duty or any other game like that, you entered into this world of people who have this common understanding, right? And you sometimes become in real life IRL friends with them because you have and which can be great, or it can be kind of awkward, right? And lots of things have been talked about, written about that, since the founding of there was a chat group that started in San Francisco 30 years ago, where people got together and had great friends on computer, and then they made the mistake of of meeting in real life. Oh, you're skunkworks. I didn't really, yeah, I don't know if I like you in real life, but that kind of thing. But so once you create a belief system, which is 7 things that I identified that are both it's all about storytelling, right? And so it's how do you get someone, I mean, when I talk, I generally show a shot of someone standing in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square, which was from the 80s or 90s. And So how do you get someone it's about building a belief system. How does you get someone to believe in something, a concept, an idea so strongly that they're willing to stand in front of a tank or in front of a bullet, right? Which people are doing right now and as we speak. And the what goes into that, and how do you, I guess, create that? How do you sustain that? How do you develop that? So it gets pretty heavy. But
Yeah.
I think that, from the time we're born, we are born with only two fears, apparently: the fear of falling and the fear of falling out of the tree, I suppose, primal, and the fear of loud noises, the T-Rex coming after us or something, and the roaring of a lion. And so I always say that, people think that food and shelter are the uh, first desired things, but they're not, because no one's hungry. The first thing is safety, because no one's hungry or wants to sleep if there's a bear in the cave, right? And so so it's all about building stories. And from the time we're born, we're told stories. You're a son, you're a brother, you're a cousin, you're a grandchild, you're whatever you are. And then this is your bed, this is your room, this is the house that we live in, this is the neighborhood, this is our block, this is the town that we live in. Here's our Target store, our Walmarts, our Starbucks, et cetera. This is your school, et cetera, et cetera. And you build these things about, these are the clothes you wear, these are your shoes, blah, blah, blah. And you just build all these stories and wrap them around you, as you move through life. And at a certain point, generally adolescence, you start saying, well, I don't know, I don't like that shirt, and I don't like those shoes, right? And eventually you move and you develop your own world that you wrap around yourself. This is who I am and what I want to be. And then somewhere along the line, you might decide that, no, I don't want to work for someone else. I want to do my own thing. Um, and then you move on, and sometimes, or you don't, and that's called the midlife crisis, right? And some people have that crisis early on, or later on. And, some people who have a job at some organizations are, really, I mean, if you work at GE, you're really fulfilling Thomas Edison's dream, and Thomas Edison has been dead for a long time, 100 years or so. And or if you work at Apple, you're fulfilling Steve Jobs' dream. If you're working at Google, you're fulfilling their dream, right? And so but some people might determine that they have their own dream. And I think that's a part of the whole thing that's happening now in our society, is that a lot of people are discovering that the pandemic kind of forced that a little bit. And so, sorry, I wandered off a little bit, but I went lateral on you. But how do you build those stories that attract us, and that we wrap around us, and they hit both the emotional parts of our brains, as well as the parts of our brains that help things to make sense, the logical part, if you will. And there's a certain pattern that creates that. And the pattern is, there's a creation story, there's a creed, there are icons that identify us, there are rituals that we participate in. This here is a ritual. There are sacred words, which can be, on the larger scope, it's English for us right now. But if you're going to Starbucks, you have to know what you want to order, 20,000 variations, or whatever it is, iced grande skinny decaf latte. The words we had to learn, right? And then there are people who don't want to be a part of our group. Those are the pagans or the non-believers. And then there's a leader. And that could be you, or that could be Steve Jobs, let's say. And so Elon Musk, whoever. And then once you are able to tell someone, this is where this idea comes from, this is what it means, this is what we believe in, here's how you know it's us, here are the ways that you fit us into your life, or we fit into your life, here's the way we talk about it, here's what we're not and don't want to become, and here's the leader, whether that's you or someone else, you've just gone through the whole 7 pieces of code.
Hmm. So
So for
let's say that,
example,
okay, give me an example, and then
yeah, so
start
where
with
were
an
you
example.
born?
Windsor, Ontario, Canada.
Oh yeah, cool. So is that Toronto?
It's about 4 hours south of Toronto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. And then so you're Canadian. And then where'd you go to high school?
Um, Amherstburg, Ontario, which is like 30 minutes away from Windsor. And then for
Mhm.
grade 12, I went to a Catholic school, which was, let's say, 20 minutes away from Windsor. So,
And then did you go to college?
yeah, yeah.
Where'd you go?
Windsor as well. But then I escaped to Ottawa, then to Guelph, all over the place, and then I took off over the world, which is exciting because as soon as
Oh,
I
cool.
got the ability to earn an income, which I had to because I had to move out when I was 17, I had to
Hmm.
start making some money. And I had to realize, okay, look, in a job was let's say $10 an hour, and I found a side hustle where I could buy and sell and fix iPhones on Craigslist, let's say, and
Hmm.
I was able to make a hell of a lot more than $10 an hour. Like let's say on a good week, I'd make the best week I made $6,000 in a week, which was freaking sweet
Hmm.
for an 18-year-old. And so as
Yeah,
soon as
no
I started
kidding.
making some money, I got in love with marketing, and then was able to start traveling the world, and lived in Italy for 2 years, traveled 36 countries, lived in 5 of them because of the marketing and the branding and the passion that I had for being able to position and sell things. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of the skinny of the story there. But yeah.
So you were part of the hustler economy,
That's how it was, baby.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't mess around. I had to survive. There was no learning marketing just to maybe hopefully
No
one day
option.
someday. It was I got to make some money so I can eat right now. And so I
Yeah.
came from that school.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from that, you come from Canada, you were part of the hustler economy. We know it's you. You are you. And you had certain rituals that you went through, right? And you have your own lexicon. Kind of the non-believers I mean, the pagans would be those who went to college, those who are not a part of the hustler economy, so to speak, um, people who had a set way approach of doing things, a kind of traditional way approach, right? And then it's you. So we've just improved your brand a little bit.
Hmm. How, let's say that I'm an entrepreneur looking to grow my business and understanding the branding and the positioning in the marketplace, how I can go about shaping this story in the minds of my consumers. Where would we
Mhm.
say that I would start? Like, let's say I've got a business, whether it be an agency or consulting or selling courses, whatever it might be. Where would I begin? Let's say that you were consulting for me. How would you start to tell me how to begin to brand myself, to tell that story? Where would we start? What's the first step?
Yeah, basically what I just outlined. Where did you start? When did you start?
Right, but when
Who
it
did you
comes to
start
actually
with?
telling the story, getting it across, as opposed to just having it in your mind or being able to tell it in a conversation, where would you start to
Well,
be able to
yeah, we
differentiate in the marketplace?
we take those 7 pieces and we design what we call a strategic brand narrative, where we break it down into the creation story, the creed, the icons,
Hmm.
whether it's the logo or the website, or it's the people who started the agency, the figureheads, um, what work you've done, you know, especially work that you've done that was award winning or whatever, or move sales, help the clients. And then what most agencies have a language that is specific to them that they try to help, and then what they're not, you know, and your digital versus traditional, your social versus digital, et cetera, right? And then you're an influencer or whatever, and you are the leader, and then or your founders are probably the leaders or whoever the figurehead is, and then you shape that into a story that includes those elements. And you can spot these stories, every week in the New York Times, when they're talking about a new person, but especially people, or a new company, let's say, or the Wall Street Journal, of course. And then you can then take each of those elements and determine, okay, where does the creation story go? Does it go on the back of a business card? If you have business cards, no one has them anymore. Does it go on the website? Sure. Does it go on LinkedIn? Yeah, probably. Does it go on Facebook? Yeah, okay. And then, but there are other forms also. You can do a video about it. Some people have done movies. I mean, The Social Network, which everyone has seen, was the backstory behind Facebook. And then I always point out that Google, because Google saw that Facebook could have a movie, so they made their own movie, which was around their creed, The Internship, which was all about, what kind of people fit into the Googleplex, right? And so the ability to take these things and to spread them across social media, digital, social, or traditional media is really what helps to create the surround that is necessary to build a brand, even if you're an individual, a
See, what
professional.
I get it,
Building it
100%.
yourself,
No,
an influencer, let's say, and
okay.
then you spread it across all the media. And people in the US anyway, it's probably the same for Canada, but in the US, we use two metrics. People in the US, people need to see you in 5 places, at least 5 places, before they even can say that, oh yeah, I think I've heard of those guys. And then the other metric is that it takes 100 hours to make a friend. And so if you are not just a hustler, but you want to create a relationship with people,
Yeah.
then that see you 5 times, with the caveat, if one of those times is the Kardashians or Beyonce or something, it probably, overwhelms. It'll probably just take that one thing. But generally 5 times before they even say, I think I've heard of you, to 100 hours sort of gives it a kind of 3D dimension of the scope of the work that needs to be done.
40.
So
Yeah.
to 100 hours is a lot of YouTubes. It's a lot of TikToks, right? It's a lot of scrolling on Instagram. So um, the with the advent of social media and so forth, yeah, you can kind of do it for free, but it's very time consuming, as you probably realize, and can be expensive to create all that content. So there you go. But that's how, sorry, but that's how I would do it. That's how you do it.
Interesting. See, what I'm trying to balance between is having the brand based around you and your ethos and your company mission, and the client, and basing the hero's journey about around something that can be easily relatable and something that they can step into the shoes of, where they're the
Mhm.
hero. We're basing your marketing and branding around your target audience as opposed to yourself. Where do you find the balance between those two? Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources. And you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast.
There is no balance. There doesn't need to be a balance between those two. You're creating a community. So you're creating a community around yourself. You're creating a community around a product. And what makes this so revolutionary is that to some people, is that this construct is the same. You're creating a community, a group of people that gather around either you or a thing or a service or a place, because you're making it meaningful. And you're basically taking something that's meaningless. People don't know who you are. How do you become meaningful? You need to shape the storyline that pings both the rational parts of people's brains and the emotional parts that create desire. And so you transit then from being meaningless to becoming meaningful, whether you're a place, person, object, concept, NFTs, um, uh, Bitcoins, and so forth. Gravity.
Gravity.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Creation story.
When you say gravity, I think of
Some guy with an apple,
the orbit.
creed, you're not going to fly off the planet. You're stuck on here. You stay close to Earth, you touch Earth.
Mhm.
The icons, the apple, Isaac Newton,
Yeah.
Gravity, anti-gravity would be the non-believer, I suppose. Yeah. And the leader, I don't know, science, Isaac Newton. I mean, gravity is a concept, you know, 20 years from now, we might discover that there's a whole different, quantum physical reason for us staying put instead of flying off. Or we
So
could
it comes
fly
down
off,
to a
who
line
knows?
of it's a belief system, right? And you're talking about
Yeah,
being
it
able to
is.
structure a belief system around your brand being somebody worth purchasing from and right now and again into the future. And so the
Yeah.
question becomes like let's go to a real estate or a we can go into a Super Bowl commercial even. Give me an example of a Super Bowl commercial that you've crafted and because this is fascinating. It's amazing that you've been able to accomplish this. So what goes into your thinking when it comes to having a Super Bowl commercial, being able to have that one touch point with millions and millions of people like that? Not the 5 or the 100 hours, but one 30-second, 15-second touch point with somebody. How do you create that story, that belief system in such a short amount of time, that stickability in their minds? Where does your mind go when I ask you that?
Well, that's going back a long time, but it is not quite the same. That is one of the pieces of media that is flat. And I have to say that producing a Super Bowl commercial is great. It's a lot of fun. Um, However, it's in today's world where advertising doesn't account for too much. It's no more important than a social media post on Instagram. It's just another piece of the 5 pieces of content. But what you do to answer your question is you find um, something that's relevant and differentiating. I mean, all that it's plotted out. There's a strategy behind it all. And although I have to say the Super Bowl, Super Bowl spots are unique in that you're basically simply trying to get attention and stickiness. And yeah.
Did you see the Kanye West one that he did recently? It was just him on an iPhone, not even horizontal, just straight up. And he says, "Go to this website," and yeah, that's it. It was there was no. I loved it because first of all, it was high ROI. It worked like crazy. He was able to get a lot of people to his website and buying things, as opposed to the rest of the branding that was taking place on the commercials, where it was like maybe a humorous or a funny story, but then there's actually a lack of connection with the brand, and by the end of it you're still wondering what the hell the ad was about, but it was entertaining. His was a direct
Yeah.
call to action to a specific link in that case, and it was so freaking cool to me because that's to me that's branding mixed with direct response marketing in one, and using
Mhm.
a medium that's traditionally just branding oriented with direct response. How do you think about the direct response world, being able to have some immediately measurable impact as opposed to uh, more of an abstract relationship with the minds of the consumer?
I actually started in direct response. And the interesting thing about direct response is that the direct response um, pillars or tenets of or process, I suppose, of the 1970s is the same thing that's in hustling. So acquisition, retention, churn, reacquisition or bringing them back, right? And then what am I missing one? I think that's it, right? Might be one. It seems like there's one more.
Increasing
Yeah.
spend per
Oh,
transaction.
resurrection. I think it was the other one, but that might be reacquisition, resurrection instead of reacquisition. Yeah, bringing them back are the um, pieces is the process for junk mail, basically. And so what people are really creating is a bunch of shitload of junk mail. And so, which means that it is stuff you throw away, basically. It's not stuff that is building a relationship. And so I'm glad you brought this up. This is a pet peeve because when you're doing this acquisition, retention, you're not trying to form a relationship. And what's irritating to me, and I think to everyone, is that when you pop up, or it should make sense, I think, to everyone, is when you pop up on a new site, oh, this looks cool. And you go onto the site then to buy potentially. The first thing you get is 10% off, 15% off, 20% off, right? And so buy now, which I'm sure has great metrics. I suppose if you didn't do that, I'm sure there are metrics that show that you need to do that to get a sale. But it's a transaction, right? Rather than an experience or an engagement or, hey, let's be friends, or a longer term interaction with someone. And so I think you're putting in, even if you're going for that longer term engagement, and of course you probably should be, right? Because you want them to come back and buy a second thing, not just the first thing. But there's that steady sort of churning and no one pays attention. Whereas to hanging on to them for the next sale, you're going on for the next new customer, right?
Right.
Which I think is flawed.
Yeah.
Which I think is flawed because you're, rather than shotgunning out into the universe at large, those people who have already purchased from you have a higher intention rate of repurchasing, making a second person, than someone who doesn't know you at all. And so I think that the return on advertising spend, ROAS, is probably too high, is higher than it needs to be for most companies because that. And so what we do is we divide the world into two people, basically, and focus on them. The zealots, people who already love you and believe in you, feel like they belong with you, and those who are potential zealots. And we find out what makes us sticky for the zealots and what's holding potential zealots back from becoming zealots. Sometimes it might be price, or it might be geography, or they can't find us on the shelf, or whatever that is, and we try to remove those friction points. And because I think the larger thing about this, aside from the tactics and stuff, is that when you are in a community where everyone feels they belong and the same, and they're part of the same thing, we're doing a lot of work also with communities inside brands. And I think that in reality, that's an artificial barrier or a boundary or something. Because if in the best brands, like when you walk into an Apple, are you an Apple person?
Oh, hell yeah, baby.
When I walk into an Apple store, I'm surrounded by people like me, right? It doesn't matter if it's the guy, there are no counters, but behind the artificial counter, excuse me, the Genius one. There used to be a Genius bar. And all. I mean, they're all, the people that work there are the same as me, as the same as every other customer, all part of the same Apple thing. And if you go to Burning Man or South by Southwest, which is happening right now, it doesn't matter if you work with South by Southwest, as an employee, or you're at Burning Man as one of the crew or whatever, or you go to a concert, and the band, the crew, whatever it is, everyone's there for the same reason and interacting because you're all part of the same community. And I think that there's this artificial sense that we put on things like, oh, the people at the factory or whatever are not part of the community. They're this internal group that needs, when in essence, everyone in the best brands, the best branded communities, everyone is a believer. Everyone feels like they belong. You're part of my crew. You're part of my tribe. You're part of my group that I belong with. Right? Does that make sense?
100%, man. I love where we're going with this, because you say one of your pet peeves is the lack of continuity, the one transactional mindset, and as opposed to there are all
transactional minds,
as opposed to looking at it over 18 months and being able to have the relationship with the client, as opposed to, oh, you bought something from me, great, on to the next one. And it's so common with online entrepreneurs, especially right now. It's like new client. We need new clients all the time, but they're lacking the focus on the existing clientele, the possibility of having so much more of a return, not only monetarily, but also in the community sense over 18, 24 months, as opposed to next week and next week alone. So what do you say to somebody? Is one of your pet peeves? Let's say you're talking to somebody who only has this mindset of, I want to make a dollar right now, and then whatever happens to the client afterwards doesn't matter. It's a super common, prevalent mindset with the internet entrepreneurial space right now. What do you say to that person to help them
Absolutely.
start to shift their mindset from transaction to relationship?
Well, the first thing I say is good luck. And usually they're sold on what they're doing because that's the only thing they know, right? And so, and it's past performance, right? But there's also a lot of studies, research studies in mobile and everywhere else that demonstrate that if you build a relationship and well, just the straightforward transactional part, let's just stick there, is that the person, like as I mentioned earlier, the person who has already bought your product has a higher inclination to buy you a second time than someone random out on the street, which is what you're doing. You're trying to get those random out on the street people uh, to become aware of you and so forth. And so we push the awareness button, which is a shotgun approach. And when in fact, to get someone to buy the second time or the third time or beyond and beyond is much easier. And we rarely focus on that because how many new customers do we have? How many new clicks, right? Is the measurement. And so it's also less expensive to get them to buy the second time and the third time, right? Then go out shotgunning the return on your advertising in terms of return on ad spend. And so the new thing is to, by the way, is to get people to come to your site and to stay on your site. So there's a new thing going on that's beyond influencers and all that stuff to making your site kind of a portal into their lifestyle. And so people who like X also like Y, that
Yeah.
kind of thing that Amazon sort of started way back in the beginning. If you like this book, you might like this one. Well, if you like this book, you might like this book also, but you also might like wine, you might like to travel, you might like to buy, a certain kind of car, et cetera, and listen to a certain kind of music, seek a certain kind of movies, et cetera, et cetera. So that expands out. And so if you can find those adjacent likes and preferences and things that I fill my world with, hey, you're truly a part of my tribe because you're also a part of this tribe over here, this tribe over here. And so to build that on your website gets people to stay on your website longer. And there are all sorts of studies that show that people who stay on the website longer tend to buy more, right? And buy again and again and again, because you're part of the same mental mindset, if you will. You're meaningful. You become more meaningful. So there are companies, there's one called Props and other companies where they actually get creators. In the old word, we used to call them feature articles. That's what we call them, feature articles and so forth. And those are the articles that you read and you stay in there, they're sticky and you stay in there and spend more time on site, et cetera. And then you might find something else that you like. And so Goop is a little bit like that, I think, because she has the skincare, but also the food stuff. Started with food and then became skincare and all these other things, botanicals and so forth that make you stay on the site for a while. And in addition to Gwyneth's personal philosophy, there are other things too out there, prior and so forth. So that is sort of the new trend. So instead of going to these big mega sites like Amazon or whatever, you go to the smaller boutique sites, which are really less of a catalog of products, more specifically in your likes and interest. Speaking to your likes and
Even just
interests.
personally speaking, that's what I like to shop as. Is not like I'll go for a brand that specializes in one thing and then have multiple relationships with multiple brands based on each category of thing instead of for example, buying cologne from Lacoste. Lacoste is a t-shirt company. I wouldn't buy cologne from a t-shirt company. Rolex, Montblanc, these are separate categories. I wouldn't buy
North Face, Patagonia.
Right, you see, and so
Yeah, yeah,
Canada Goose, that you see these companies who are known for one thing. I wouldn't go and buy I think Canada Goose might sell I don't know, let's say they sell shoes or something. It's like, to me they're a jacket company. So I buy jackets from the jacket company. And so you're saying
yeah.
to have these narrow streams. It's still so curious though how you go about shifting, tactically speaking, from somebody who is
Mhm.
who's looking at their clients as a single transactional basis to still being able to monetize it, but then also shifting that mindset to a long-term relationship oriented business, because it's so
Well, it's all
difficult. It's
about
easy to
being
focus on the
human, right?
profit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. So it's all about being human, first of all,
Right.
rather than being a transaction.
Yeah.
Where's your checkbook? Which is what the 15% off does is, reach for your checkbook or your credit card, I guess. And so there are different ways of doing it. They're forming partnerships with other people that are like-minded. And you see that all the time in fashion. It's, X by X, right? And then by Kanye or whatever. And then although he's his own brand, I guess. But anyway, you can form partnerships with people. You
Which goes
can
back to the
have
adjacent industries like you were talking about. Yeah.
adjacencies, yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
because those people and my people and your people are the same people, so let's get together,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so um, that's huge, and there's a reason for that, right? And so where there which this thought just occurred to me. Whereas you have all of these ampersand companies that kind of follow Abercrombie and Fitch, which is of course over 100 years old. So there was an Abercrombie and there was a Fitch, but you have something, I'm just making this up, Ivy and Honey, right? And you can automatically assume that they probably sell candles and scented things and and t-shirts and so forth. But anyway, um, there are a lot of those all over the place, and all the malls, right? All the strip malls have them, and or online, and so sort of made up marketing things. They're marketing efforts rather as really branded efforts, I think. So anyway, more transactional.
Right. And so we can take the 15% off pop up on a website as an example, as a tactical thing that people do that's more of a transactional
Mhm.
tactic instead of a relationship building, friendship building, a sort of bonding mechanism. It's not that, it's here, use this to kind of get like a cheap little buy right now thing off, and it doesn't have that connection. So what about a recommendation instead of the 15%? What could somebody have in exchange for this minor tactical piece that would be more so a relationship building mechanism?
Yeah, I think that it's you go into your personas and figure out what else do they like. And so if there's 60% of your people like music, okay, then what kinds of music? And it might be, there are hundreds of kinds of music these days, but it might be fit a particular genre or something like that. And so pull that in. Is there a music artist that everyone likes? Et cetera. And so, or just different kind of music that you can play. And some people do this already, obviously, but it's finding out what those adjacencies are, identifying them, figuring out which ones aren't already being covered. And it's all about differentiating yourself. And by the way, the 7 pieces of code, primal code, are also differentiating unto themselves. And so the creation story is different, the creed is different, icons, rituals, sacred words, non-believers, leaders are all points of differentiation. And even though some of those might be similar, your creation story might be not unlike, 1,000 other creation stories. But if you're just 1% different, by the time you fill out all 7 things, you're 7% different, and that's, a good number. It's, yeah, 50% would be better, but 7's not so bad
Mhm.
out in the real world. So it's finding the adjacencies, figuring out what they are, figuring out new ways to approach them, and going from there.
So what would you put on the website instead of the 15% off? Like a partnership with or a
I think it
recommendation
depends
of
on the
something.
company and what you're selling.
Right.
And it's being, I mean, that's the inspiration. What is the other thing? And then it's different for what you're selling. It's different if you're a hotel or selling a car, selling t-shirts or candles.
Can you give me an example?
That's where the creativity comes in, and boom.
Let's say it's a candle store. Right now they've got a
Yeah.
15% off thing that pops up, and it annoys the shit out of customers, but it might drive sales a little bit. What is something that we could put on there instead of having that maybe hopefully boost profit right now? What's something that we can replace that with? Let's say for a candle store, would it be, hey, we noticed that since you're here, you might be interested in X, so here's a,
So here's what you could do. You
yeah.
could have a trip. Let's see, the fragrance for candles is roses, and there's a specific valley in France that creates those roses. So you could send people a bouquet of those roses, or you could send them to France.
Mm. Like a sweepstakes
Yeah.
getaway, sign up for
If
this,
you,
you
if
might win
if
a
you have
set.
any other questions like that, I have to send you an invoice.
All right. Well, how does this correlate with making friends? Because this is what we're talking about at the end of the day is building a relationship with somebody at an
Well, it's about
individual
building a
level.
community. It's about, well, you're talking about, I mean, there are different kinds of communities. You're talking about one that we pay for to be in, basically. And so it is about that's what we're talking about marketing now, as opposed to building a community. I mean, as opposed to building this group. And so this is a um, relationship that you buy into, you opt into. And so you opt in because they're kind of your kind of people
Does there
at
have to
scale,
be a does there
at
have to be a
scale.
dichotomy between marketing and building a community? Because I look at like even just let's say Churchill in World War II, that's a lot of marketing involved to build up the coalition, the relationship with one another, the willingness to fight for your kind. To me, that's marketing and building a community in one. Does there have to be a dichotomy between the two? How do you look at those two?
That's propaganda,
Well, yeah, which is marketing
right?
essentially.
And you've built a belief system around a government, around a culture, around a people, and um, and there are adjacencies there called FDR and the United States manufacturing facilities, blah blah blah. And so you um, it's the same, only different. I mean, you're um, mixing two different things that are not the same almost. The but they
How
are
are they
cultures.
different?
I am going to restate that. You're building different communities, but the purpose behind them is different. So in one, you're talking about a national community of people. In the other, you're talking about people who want to buy shit, right? And so the mechanics that go into them are different, but the process is the same.
Hmm.
That makes sense?
It does.
So in other words, I mean,
They're still buying into
we
something
voted this thing in,
regardless.
which is how we paid for it, I suppose. You paid with your vote. But I mean, we're talking about capitalism and we're talking about, democracy or whatever. And so those are two different constructs that are individually built the same way, I would say.
Yeah.
There's a creation story behind each one
Yeah.
of them. There's a creed behind each of them. There's icons behind each of them, etc., and rituals, so forth.
Yeah.
And they've created two different things. So you're kind of comparing gravity with Churchill.
You
They both
can,
have
because
this,
Churchill was
but they
the,
both
but
do
let's say
different
Churchill
things,
was
and
the mass of matter floating in space that things are revolving around. So Churchill could be the sun, and then the different segments of communities within England in this case would be the planets. So you could just compare Churchill with gravity. To me, there's not much of a difference between the marketing that took place in a war to get people behind their cause, or if you're building a community online, you're selling a course and you're trying to get people bought into your style of thinking so that, yes, they can buy from you on an ongoing basis, but also be a part of this community, the same way that you would form a democracy.
Yeah,
You know,
you're
there's
right.
right, there's a leader, and then
Yeah, I
you
don't
follow.
disagree with that. But I
Okay.
think you're creating a mixed metaphor, if you will. And it's too early in the morning for that.
All right, man. I had fun with you, dude.
Oh,
What's something else that you'd like to add before we kick this off here?
oh, um, no, what would you like to add?
I would like to
I
add
guess I
that.
would like to add that if you are, I mean, I think just Churchill and all that aside, I think there are a lot of people out there that are stuck. And my sense is, and I'm not stuck, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are feel stuck or they feel trapped, which I guess is the same as feeling stuck, either in their work or their life or in their job. And I would say that there's a sense of, and this is probably subject for a totally other session, but there's a difference between bounded brands and unbounded brands. And bounded brands are those that, and this might touch a little bit on the whole Churchill thing, but the notion is that there are a whole bunch of brands out there trying to be faster, cheaper, smarter, longer lasting, more sustainable, more durable. That's longer lasting, isn't it? But anyway, they're in all of those buckets, right? More colorful, whatever.
Hmm.
And they're just trapped in that, and they do work on that all the time, right? I mean, there are 300 different car companies and they're all trying to be the same thing basically, right? And we have 100 kinds of jeans, over 100 kinds of things, options to drink this morning, when you woke up. And so people are just buried in that. But there are other things out there where they, like Kanye, like um, 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 sorry, who does Goop? I just mentioned her. You can edit this out, right? Like Gwyneth, who she started, which is probably a better example. Gwyneth started as an actress. She had to look no further than her own mother to see what the trajectory of continuing to be an actress was. And if you're a singer or songwriter, your trajectory is top 10 hits, playing in stadiums, and then you wind up in Vegas, right? And so what she did though is she determined that, well, I could do that, and she might still do that. I don't know, but or she could do something else. And so she did a quick little video. I think it was for HBO or one of them. Anyway, PBS or someone. And when she went traveling around France and Europe and so forth with two guys, a food writer for the New York Times and the guy who always wore the clogs, his name I can't think of, and they toured around all, whining and dining in all these great places to go and eat and stuff. And then she went home and she did a blog, maybe at the same time she was writing a blog, and the little blog took off, and to create Goop. And so she became essentially unbounded. So she's not just building something smarter, cheaper, faster, longer lasting, or whatever. Her acting career, she's now has a totally new career. And this kind of started in my book, they talk about a golfer who used to be famous called Arnold Palmer. And there's a T after him. And I was speaking with his agent, and he said that he knew that Arnold Palmer, in order to make him longer in sports, everyone's trying to beat your record, right? And eventually someone comes along and beats it. They hit more home runs, or they have more goals, or they, do more plays or games, et cetera, et cetera. And so if they wanted to continue for Arnold Palmer to be successful, they needed to transit Arnold Palmer from being a incredible legendary golfer to becoming a legendary businessman, a successful business person. And so they did. That's when Arnold Palmer started building golf courses. He started to have his own line of golf clubs. He had his own line of clothing. He had his own, other things as well, and his own tea, tea and lemonade mix. And so he became a successful business person. Oh, and he was in advertising, like I think American Express spots or something like that. And so he became a successful business person. Well, the next person who was in line at this talent agency, was Jack Nicklaus. And so they did the same thing with Jack. And then the next person in line at the agency was Tiger Woods. So they did Tiger Woods. And the same thing. Well, that agency sold to a place that is now known as the Endeavor Group. And Endeavor has all these rock stars and movie stars. And so they are taking brands now to create, to help them become unbounded. So you have Fenty and all these kinds of things that are out there. And I think that this is something that when we realize that, according to the stats, we're going to have 5 to 7 jobs over the course of our lifetime. It's not to become a lawyer or to become a business person or become a musician or to become, you can do that, of course, but you might have an opportunity, because we live in the United States, to do other things as well on top of that. And so that's where you become unstuck, and realizing that you can do whatever you're doing now, but you have the opportunity in the United States, the tax laws, everything in our culture encourages you to use your Yankee ingenuity to go off and find something. I understand you're Canadian, but to go off and to find something else to do,
Yeah.
And whether you're Neil Young or Leonard Cohen or Joni Mitchell or Bachman Turner Overdrive or whoever, come to the States and make your million. But but seriously, we have the ability to do that, and so that's why people come to the United States.
Right. That's the branding and the familial feeling of the United States as a whole. Patrick, dude, I had a pleasure with you, man. Thank you so much for being here. We'll keep in touch, my friend. You have a fascinating mind. It's interesting to hear where you go with it. You're all over the place, but at the same time, you tie the ideas back to the core concept at the end of the day.
I hope there was a through line somewhere. Maybe you'll find it.
I think there was. All right, Patrick, we'll keep in touch.
All right. Have a great day, Kyle.
You too, my
Yeah,
friend.
thanks for having me. Cheers.
Bye-bye. All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.